Why is the 11th Circuit sitting on its hands and not ruling against Judge Eileen Cannon? Why are they just letting time pass so that they don't have to make a ruling? And why are they still sitting on the underlying appeal of the special counsel's office as to whether Eileen Cannon was right or wrong to dismiss the indictment for finding that the special counsel was unconstitutionally appointed? We're running out of time. I cover it all on a recent edition of Popok Live. Take a listen. 3 or 4 days ago on emergency applications filed by Donald Trump, I slipped, filed for Donald Trump by his two co-conspirators, where Donald Trump controls as pawns the lawyers for both of these henchmen, both of these co-conspirators sued with him in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, espionage case. The valet butler guy, who's known as Walt Nauta, and the maintenance worker guy, who's Carlos de Oliveira. Those two guys' lawyers are paid for by Donald Trump's PAC. They do his bidding, let's be frank. And so they filed 2 pieces of paper relatively quickly. They wanted to block the release of the special counsel report. They knew it was coming because Jack Smith had already declared at the beginning of January that he was done, that he had already, that he was ready to deliver these reports as statutorily required by the special counsel law to his boss, the Attorney General. The Attorney General would then deliver it to the public, which he promised to do, and to the ranking members of the Congressional Judiciary Committees, House and Senate. That's all what the statute says he has to do. He prepared everything. I said he was going to during Christmas, New Year's. He did it. He also gave, although he did not have to do this, Jack Smith gave the opportunity to Donald Trump's lawyers on the 4th and 5th or 5th and 6th of January to sit in a closed lock room without any electronic devices and review hard copies of his 2 volumes. What they didn't know, because it was none of their business, is that Jack Smith had already made the decision he was going to recommend to Merrick Garland not to release Volume 2 while the case against de Oliveira and Walt Nauta was still pending down with Judge Cannon in the 11th Circuit. But that wasn't something he told them. That's not something that they needed to know. So they got all hot and bothered. They wrote a 15-page letter, which they leaked. The lawyers for Donald Trump, they leaked by having it filed by the lawyers for Oliveira and Nauta in their filing before Judge Cannon, this 15-page critique of Volume 1 and Volume 2. At the same time, those two same people filed an emergency motion with the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals and asked for the same relief: block the volumes. They tried to argue that both volumes needed to be blocked, even though they're only in Volume 2. In other words, how do they have standing to block a report about another trial in another courthouse with another judge that they were not involved with? That's a head scratcher. And then how did, and I argued this in a couple of hot takes, how does Eileen Cannon even have jurisdiction since she dismissed the indictment? Donald Trump was dismissed by the Department of Justice after he won election under Office of Legal Counsel guidelines. She dismissed the indictment, finding that the special counsel was invalidly, unconstitutionally appointed and funded. That took the case up to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which should have divested her of jurisdiction as a trial judge about a case that wasn't going to trial. So she had no jurisdiction. She tried to argue that she had some sort of remnants, some sort of fumes of remaining jurisdiction because the case could be returned to her in the future. And so she needed to protect the defendants. And the 11th Circuit sort of sat on the sidelines on that issue. I thought they were going to wrap her knuckles and say, you have no jurisdiction. We'll take over here. If we want to stay or block, red light about the reports release, we'll do that. But they kind of were very, very quiet. I mean, yes, appellate courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. They don't like to get involved in things they don't have to. Sometimes they let time solve problems without ruling. They do that a lot, and they did that here. So almost back to back, we had 2 orders that seemed to be competing just 3 or 4 days ago. Cannon said, I'm still blocking, and I'm going to block for 3 days after the 11th Circuit rules, which was Sunday night, Monday night kind of thing. Let's say Monday night. And the 11th Circuit said, okay, I read all the papers. Green light. Let's get the Volume 1 out the door on DC election interference. We don't want to touch that one. So all we had to do then was wait for the 3 days that Cannon had ruled on to expire. Meantime, the Department of Justice took an appeal of that to try to speed that 3 days up. I thought maybe we get it a day early, but that didn't get ruled upon. And therefore, we ran till Monday night at 12:01 a.m. for the release of Volume 1. Then there was this flurry of emergency motions being filed in front of Judge Cannon. Trump tried to intervene, but which is weird, okay? Because he's already been dismissed from the indictment. I've never heard of a criminal defendant who got out of a case trying to get back into a case. My argument would be, if he wants back in, maybe that waives the dismissal by the prosecutors, and he should be a criminal defendant again in the case. Be careful what you ask for. You're intervening in a criminal case that was dismissed against you. Maybe it's back on. That's another argument. So he tries to intervene, but he doesn't do it on an emergency basis. So it kind of sits there languishing. He tries to file this friend of the court brief, Trump does, which is completely ridiculous. The Department of Justice has now taken over the case from Jack Smith, who's resigned, as we know, on the 8th of January. And Merrick Garland has already, on the 7th, gotten his reports. He's already prepared a letter to Congress saying, I'm ready to give you Volume 1 and Volume 2. I'm just waiting for the order situation to get resolved in Florida. Cannon asked the Department of Justice to swear on a stack of Bibles, my interpretation, that there's nothing in Volume 1 about the DC election interference case that backs up onto or maps onto Oliveira and Nauta in the Mar-a-Lago case, which they do. They say, we've looked, there's nothing, couple of passing stray references, but nothing substantive. And with that, the judge says green light and releases Volume 1. Donald Trump doesn't like that. So he files like at 10 o'clock at night last night an emergency motion. Like, reminds me of like A Few Good Men. No, I strenuously emergency apply for another stay. Don't release Volume 1. Don't release Volume 2. And the judge says, here's what I'm going to do on Volume 2. That one is red light, or at least amber light. I'm going to do a full briefing schedule. We're going to have a hearing on Thursday, literally this Thursday. And I'm going to decide whether Volume 2 should go not to the public, because Merrick Garland has already said he's not releasing it to the public on his watch, on his tenure. And that's a problem, because Pam Bondi, the soon-to-be incoming Attorney General, she's not going to release it. This is like when Robert Mueller handed off the Mueller report to Bill Barr and said, do the right thing, Bill. I know you will. And then we never saw that report again. Merrick Garland, similarly, he sort of left a love note on the desk of Pam Bondi. We've seen it. It's my version of the love note. And it said something like this. It's my judgment that after the case is over, one way or the other, against Oliveira and Nauta, then Volume 2 should be released to the public because it's in the public interest. Well, that's great. But that's sort of aspirational recommendation from Merrick Garland. That and like $6.50 will get you a cup of coffee in a bathroom at Starbucks, right? So she's just going to ignore that. The question now for the judge this week is whether it even goes to the ranking members of the House and the Senate. If it goes to Jamie Raskin and Dick Durbin and Jim Jordan and the other guy, does it go to them, which statutorily it must? She's trying to block that, interfering with the separation of powers, but she's done that before. Interfering in a place where she has no jurisdiction, she's done that before. Interfering with the executive branch, she's done that before. So I'm not sure how Thursday's going to turn out. If I know Judge Cannon will get a paperless order that'll block the Mar-a-Lago Volume 2 from even going to Congress, and then Jack Smith's going to have to take that up at the 11th Circuit on appeal, because that's an important issue, but we're running out of time. And if all this doesn't get resolved by Inauguration Day, by the 20th, like in the afternoon, it's over, because Donald Trump is going to pardon. He already has it prepared, I'm sure, De Oliveira and Walt Nauta, ending the case. Once the case is over, there's no more live case or controversy. That's a requirement for all cases, that there actually be a dispute and parties before the court, and the 11th Circuit won't have to rule, which is troubling, because they won't have to rule either on the underlying appeal that's been sitting with them for 4 months, which says that Judge Cannon, hopefully, if they had ruled, was wrong in finding that the indictment was improperly brought by a special counsel that is unconstitutionally appointed. That's an important issue that the 11th Circuit just like sitting on. Now, my fear is being reinforced because of this new order they just issued today, like right before I started recording. in which the 11th Circuit said, hey, this is my version. Hey, all those motions that are pending before us? They're all moot. Moot, 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 moot. Meaning we're not ruling on them because volume 1 is out. Volume 1's out. We were going to rule on volume 1, but it's out. It's out. Green light. Except what about volume 2? So they're not commenting on volume 2's process that Eileen Cannon has set up for a Thursday hearing. Are they endorsing it? Did they forget about volume 2? I think Jack Smith, or now the Department of Justice, has to file either a motion for reconsideration and ask them to clarify why they ignored volume 2, which is this huge issue of separation of powers about turning over the report to the Congress and whether a judge can stop that. Or the alternative is they wait till Thursday, get a bad ruling out of Cannon, which we know is coming. Now we're out of time. Monday's the inauguration. And then take a quick appeal to the 11th Circuit, which has already indicated they don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. This is why, again, I'm back to where I was on Legal AF on Saturday when I was debating with Ben. We're not going to see this Mar-a-Lago report. It's barely going to get to Congress in time. And then once all bets are off and these guys are pardoned, the question is, does that ever get to Congress? And does it ever get to the people? If that decision is not being made by Merrick Garland, if he doesn't have the cojones, the brass ones, right now to release it, then we're never going to see it because Pam Bondi is going to bury this in the deepest recesses of the Department of Justice. And no Freedom of Information Act request or any type of public records request is ever going to unearth it. Maybe when the Democrats come back into power 4 years from now and there's a new adult in the room named Attorney General, they'll dig it out, dust it off, and give it to us. That's happened before. 10, 20, 30 years later, we get things like the unredacted Pentagon papers and things. That is going to happen. But like in the meantime, right now, no way. My daughter is going to be going to like first grade or fifth grade by the time we see the Mar-a-Lago report. Could be wrong. That's where I'm at right now. Welcome back. That's a new show and podcast on the Midas Touch Network. It's every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Popok Live. It's about 45 minutes in length. It's just me. Topics. I take questions. I give answers. I don't pull punches. I don't take prisoners. It's Popok Live, Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. on the Midas Touch Network. While you're here, help us continue to grow this pro-democracy channel. Legal AF, hit the subscribe button, that big blue button, and we'll see you on my next Legal AF contribution. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.